I didn't move here to be discovered. I moved because the rent fit inside the envelope I kept taped to my fridge, and because the third-floor walk-up on Maple had a window that fit my thrift store desk like it was cut for it. The glass wore a film you couldn't scrub away, so the alley beyond always looked like a memory. Pigeons doing their little union meeting on the deli dumpster, steam bleeding from a bent vent, the glow of a TV in the rear apartment pulsing like a sleepy heartbeat. If I leaned back in my chair, the radiators ticking nested into my own pulse. And that's the metronome I used when I recorded after closing at the coffee shop. People think making videos is ring lights and affirmation. For me, it was a wool blanket thumbtacked over the closet, a second-hand USB mic that smelled faintly like warm plastic, and a desk lamp turned to bounce off the ceiling so my face looked less tired than it felt. I'd crawl into my little booth with my tea and talk like the night was listening. Soft recipes, thrift store confessions, the sort of voice strangers tell you makes their apartments feel less empty. I never aimed higher than paying the gas bill and, once in a blue month, treating myself to fruit that wasn't bruised. Daytime in the building was a circus. Someone upstairs like dragging furniture around for exercise. Mrs. Hernandez a boiled fish and debated with her sister on speaker. A kid with a squeaky-wheeled truck did laps of the hall until a parent barked. After 10, though, things settled. The steam hissed, the TV laugh tracks thinned. The deli hosed down the alley and locked the gate. That's when I'd hit record, put a hand on the pop filter like it was a little steering wheel, and steer us through the dark. Quick pause, if you're into this kind of late-night storytelling, hit subscribe. Keeps the lights on here, literally. I've been pretty demotivated lately because the response has been a whisper, and the algorithm doesn't tuck you in when you need it to. Drop a comment too. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your state or your city. I like knowing who's awake with me and how your night sounds. Okay, back in. The first knock came like a question, not an accusation. 3 light taps that suggested I could ignore them if I wanted. I slid out of the blanket, blinked at the amber hallway bulb that hummed like a trapped insect, and opened the door to a man with a cardigan, an apologetic smile, and a gray hair kinked like a tilde in his eyebrow. "Hey," he said, tapping his chest. "New neighbor, Rob 3C. I think I recognize your voice. Some people say that like a kindness." He said it carefully, as if the words had sharp edges he didn't want to cut me with. "I'm Eva," I said, and because humor is a defense, I try to keep it below a lullaby. He laughed a half-second longer than necessary. His eyes flicked past my shoulder, the way people look at the shape of your life without meaning to. "One tiny note," he said, already half apologizing with his hands. "If you bounce the lamp off that wall," he pointed, "you'll get less shine on your cheeks. Gorgeous voice, by the way." He backed away like he lived on a spring. I said thanks and shut the door and thought, well, that's a moment. The next morning there was a post-it tucked under my mat. "Try daylight bulbs. Cardboard eggshells make cheap diffusers. Smile face. R." It could have been neighborly. That afternoon, another note. "Consider a pop filter. Your peas hit a little hard at 5:12 on the night tea video." I told myself helpful is still helpful even when it's a little intimate. I bought the pop filter. It helped. At 1:30 a.m., during a whispery thrift hall run-through, came the second knock. Same gentle rhythm. I opened to Rob in the same cardigan, hair obediently combed. "Sorry," he said. "Odd request. There's this sound you made in a mango video, knife scraping stone when you hit the pit. It helps me sleep. Could you maybe a 10-minute loop? Nothing weird. Just the sound." He said nothing weird, like someone placing a blanket over a shape you shouldn't be able to see. "I don't really do custom," I said, keeping it light. "Ido what Ido? If the sound shows up, it shows up." "Of course," he said smoothly. "No pressure. Great apartment, by the way." His eyes flicked inward again, inventorying. I closed the door and felt, absurdly, like he'd taken a molecule of air with him. Then the notes grew vines. "Coasters for your mug will kill table noise. Your gain's a hair high tonight. Hanging towels in the bathroom helps with echo. Try a read there?" And then, custom request, whisper counting backward from 300. I ignored that line. He started knocking with little offerings. Rubber bands for cable management, a spare foam panel, a link to a friendly landlord-tenant guide, printed out and highlighted. He'd hand me things like we were doing a group project. Our building is thin in the way old bodies get thin. You can hear the structure thinking about itself. Pipes bang like somebody arguing far away. The radiator breathes in damp, labored puffs. Mr. Greer, the landlord, lives 2 doors down. He's a man who paints over a leak and calls it fixed, who wears enough cologne to fog glass. It's an old building, sweetheart, he'll say when the heat misses a day. She creaks when she's settling. He and Rob were murmuring at the end of the hall one afternoon when I came back with groceries. When they saw me, Greer's smile slid off and Rob's widened, and I realized neighborly wasn't the right word anymore. The first email from office at Maple Properties landed like a misdelivered package. Subject: noise complaint. It accused late-night disturbances and lewd vocalizations. It threatened lease actions. It was signed management the way a storm signs itself rain. I forwarded it to Greer with apologies and he replied, "Talk to the source. Keep it down." No greeting, no name. The air in the hall tasted like lemon cleaner and fried onions. The bulb hummed. At 2 a.m., 3 patient taps sounded at my door and Rob's voice through the crack said, "Soft. Just checking you're okay." I recorded quieter. A silly sentence, but you know what I mean. Clothes stuffed into corners. Couch cushions leaned like shields. I read a whole page without breathing above a murmur. 2 days later, another email. Anonymous reports of moaning, pounding, profane shouting. I don't talk like that on camera. I don't talk like that in my life. Mrs. Hernandez met my eyes on the stairs and then glanced away like she'd been told something about me she didn't want to carry. I knocked on Rob's door because part of me still believed in reason. He opened fast, as if he lived in the hinge. "I'm getting messages," I said. "Somebody's lying." "That's awful," he said sympathetically. "I've actually written in your defense. I'll CC you." His smile tucked a little. "If you wanted to do a demonstration through the wall, even something soothing, I could record it for Greer. Proof that you're not whatever they're saying." "I'm not doing custom," I said. Came out firmer than I intended. The look in his eyes cooled 2 degrees and warmed back up. "No offense taken," he murmured. "If your lock sticks, I can take a look. I'm handy. I have a key." He said the last like a weather report. That night the pounding started. Not polite taps, but open-handed thuds that reached into your chest and checked your heart rate. Thump, thump, thump. I texted Greer. No answer. The thuds settled into silence. Then a key slid into my lock and turned until the chair under the knob knocked the wood. The knob breathed like someone testing the seal on a jar. Then a small laugh through the door and unhurried footsteps away. Morning brought a final warning. With a demand, I attend a meeting in the office Monday at 10. Owner on site. I didn't know we had an owner on site. The office is a glass rectangle beside the lobby with a dead rubber plant and a calendar of somebody else's lake. Greer sat inside a fog of cologne, and beside him in the landlord's chair was Rob in a crisp white shirt, looking like the future had always promised him a leather swivel chair. "Thanks for coming," Rob said the way a dentist says it. He slid a folder at me. Screenshots of my channel, timestamps, a printed sheet titled Community Standards Violations with words like sexualized and harassment in bold. Another sheet said alternative options. "We'd love to keep you," he went on. "Walls are thin. Tenants have concerns. But we're prepared to offer a content-adjusted lease. We provide soundproofing and a slight rent reduction. You provide an approved nightly catalog. Whisper counting. White noise. And that knife on stone from the Mango episode. 10 minutes at 10. Non negotiable." "You can't do that," I said. Felt like my voice had to climb stairs to reach my mouth. "Of course we can," he said pleasantly. "We own the roof, or you can go. 30 days. Complaints have a way of following talent, though." I walked out feeling like I'd been unzipped and put back together wrong. I pulled espresso for people who needed whipped cream mountains and pretended my hands weren't shaking on the portafilter. When I came home, there was a post-it on my door. "Let's be reasonable." The hallway hummed. The lemon smell rode the air like a bright lie. I sat on the bed and looked at the microphone with its little red eye and the pop filter like a black coin, and I thought about how people write that my voice makes them feel safe, as if a rope were thrown across dark water and tugged gently from my side. I sat up in the closet, dragged the blanket closed, and hit record. I told a story about a girl who talked to the night so the night wouldn't talk back with its meaner voice. I whispered the names of herbs my grandmother used. I counted backward, and when I reached 280 I said, "Conversational as daylight. Rob, you're trespassing." The knock came immediately afterward, like he'd been waiting with his ear down. "Let's not do this," he said, voice velvet thin. "I'm here to help." "Go away," I said, not loud. The mic likes honesty more than volume. "You want to stay," he murmured. "I can make that happen, or I can make you very itinerant. Up to you." At 9:30, the office account sent a cheerful confirmation of my participation and a note. Key drop for maintenance. 9:45 p.m., tenant presence required. I replied no 6 times. 6 auto-replies chirped thanks. I packed my mic and laptop in my backpack because running to Worstlocks is still running. I put a wobbly chair under the knob because ritual is a way to give your hands work while your mind sprints. At 9:47, the hallway went as quiet as a held breath. The key turned. The chain caught. A small black wedge slid through the crack and lifted the chain with a tweak. Like a magician's flourish you hate yourself for admiring. I hit record because that's what I know to do. "Custom sounds," I said, calm as a recipe. "Fine." I scraped the knife along the stone, long and careful, the sound like teeth learning manners. The door opened and Rob stepped inside with a smile that showed a tooth I hadn't noticed. A chip like a bite taken from porcelain. He kept one hand behind his back. He didn't see the phone perched on the shelf, its red light blinking like a sleepy star. He didn't see his own outline boxed in the window bars. "See," he said, "we can be reasonable. This doesn't have to be a conflict." I kept counting, voice level, the way you talk to someone standing on a ledge. At 260, I said, "Easy as asking someone to pass the salt." Turned toward the window and waved to the folks who liked the knife sound. He chuckled, indulging the bit, and half-turned. The camera got the master key clean as daylight. I drew the blade once more along the stone. "Leave," I said, "or I upload." He studied me with something like pity. "You think anyone will come?" he asked. "You think the building prefers you to me? I can file and file and file until your mail chases you like a dog with a bad owner. I can be at the end of any hallway you choose." Neither of us moved. The radiator sighed. Somewhere far away, the kid's truck gave a single squeak, like the echo of a life I wanted. Rob set the key on my counter with care, as if it were fragile. 10 o'clock, he said. "We'll call tonight a trial. Knife on stone. Whispered numbers. We'll get along." He stepped out, pulled the door almost closed, and let the chain hang empty like jewelry on a stranger's throat. His shoes ghosted down the hall. I uploaded a sliver anyway. A hand with a key, the wedge lifting the chain, a voice asking for custom sounds. Title, Noise Complaint. The comments arrived like rain on a tin roof. "That's illegal," said some. "Get out," said others. "It's a skit," dozens insisted. The platform chirped flags at me like birds. Office at pinged with a smiley receipt. Greer slid a notice under my door saying rent in cash. First of the month. Nothing about keys. At 10, the hallway smelled fiercely of lemon, and the bulb hummed like an insect pinned in a museum. I sat with my back to the door and counted backward for whoever needed it. People in states I'll never see, times I'll never live in, apartments where the dark is too full of teeth. The knife sang on stone, long and kind. The key didn't turn. No knock came. But halfway through, a weight settled quietly against the other side of my door, the boards giving a tired complaint. The building became a shell with my voice inside it making an ocean sound. I finished at 1 and gave the directions for pie crust the way my grandmother taught me. Cold butter, patient hands, don't overwork what you want tender. I didn't sleep. The little red light blinked and blinked, a far buoy. Toward dawn the pigeons convened in the alley and the deli gate screeched open, and somewhere down on the second floor someone laughed in their kitchen in the loose, relieved way people laugh when the night didn't take them this time. I brewed tea and held the mug to my face. The chair sat under the knob like a faithful dog that can't actually fight. Through the door, the weight shifted and resettled. If you're still here, if the sound of my talking makes your walls feel less thin, hit subscribe and say where you're listening from and what time your clocks say. The thing I can give is small but stubborn. I can lay a bridge of words in the dark for you and for me. He owns the locks and the hall light and the lemon smell. He can sit outside my door like weather. But when I speak, this room is mine, and the building has to listen to me too. And for now anyway, so does he. The first thing you should know is my apartment smells like fabric softener and coffee. It's not a big place, mid-rise on a quiet street that changes personalities with the seasons. Food trucks and stroller traffic when the weather is friendly, echoing sneakers and tired dogs when it's cold. I live on the 4th floor, a hallway that always feels 2 degrees cooler than it should, with a shared mailroom in the basement that's more of a tiled cave. If you've ever stood there at midnight, waiting for the last elevator to groan you up, you know how a building can develop a mood. Ours is dim and watchful, like it's trying to remember your face and then can't. The fluorescents flicker, the carpet is thin enough to memorize footfalls, and the laundromat next door vents a permanent breeze of warm, lint-scented air through the alley. I film at my small desk by the window. The channel is mostly unboxings, thrift flips, tiny apartment hacks. People tell me my voice is calm. I learned to talk to the camera the way I talk to the kettle. Even-tempered, patient, making small promises. If you post enough, you start to recognize the same names in the comments. There was one that stuck out because it was always there immediately, within a minute, sometimes before the thumbnail finished rendering properly. Their name was simple, almost shy, just the kind of username that looks like it came with the internet. They never said anything crude, usually just first, and a heart or a sentence about how the lighting looked nice, or a question so gentle it felt like the nudge of a friend. I told myself it was flattering. When you do this work, there's a little dopamine lever in your head and you can hear yourself pushing it. I'd smile, heart the comment, go back to editing the next cut. It felt like a routine, as steady as the tea kettle and the elevator that complained differently depending on who was standing inside it. The first package wasn't strange. It was a pair of slippers from a brand I'd mentioned once. The exact pale gray I keep adding to my wish lists like a shrug. There was a note on cardstock. You deserve soft mornings. No name, no return address, just a postmark from the big sorting center 3 neighborhoods over. Viewers send things sometimes. I've made it clear I don't need gifts, but sometimes they arrive anyway, sweet and harmless. So I thank the universe and set them by the door to off-gas that factory smell. They fit perfectly. I told myself that was coincidence. A lot of people in the world wear size 7. It's practically default. The second package came 2 days later and it had my favorite snack inside. The brand that always hides on the top shelf and pretends it's difficult to find. Same cream cardstock note. Remember to treat yourself between edits. I heard my own voice, the tone I use in videos when I line up a row of thrifted mugs, saying, "See, this is nice. Not everything has a shadow underneath." I put the bag on my desk and ate a handful. Salt bloomed on my tongue. The kitchen clock ticked in that way that sounds more committed after dark. By the third package, the paperback book I used to beg my dad to reread on sick days, the cover with the witch's hat tipping into a blue-black sky, I stopped telling myself it was chance. I had never mentioned that book online. The note said, "You left this under the radiator once and the spine curled like a cat. Thought you'd like a clean copy." I ran my finger over the uncracked cover and felt something like rubber bands tightening one by one. You should know the mailroom. It's too bright and too enclosed. Stainless steel boxes like 100 metallic faces with locked mouths. The security camera is angled at the wall of packages as if it's worried about their feelings. That night, I went down to check my mailbox even though I knew there wasn't anything in it. The elevator doors shut with me inside and I could see my reflection layered across the steel. A woman tired, trying to look like she wasn't. A couple came in on the second floor, whispering, smelling like winter and laundry detergent, and we rode down together without making eye contact. At the mailroom door, Mr. Patel from 4B was sorting envelopes and complaining softly to them, as if they might apologize. He said, "You doing okay up there?" Like he meant the weather, like the hallway temperature and rent and national news were all the same category. Fine, I said. Someone keeps sending me gifts. He grinned. Maybe I should start a channel. They're good gifts, I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. He looked at me over his glasses. You got anybody who would know to do that? I opened my empty box. It's dark. Metal smell breathed at me. Not really. Neighbors talk, he said, because that's what people say when they don't want to say what they're thinking. You let the office know if anything's off. That night I read under a throw blanket, the kind with one unraveling tassel I keep meaning to fix. The radiator clicked like a cricket. On my phone, a bell icon bloomed with another comment the second I posted a short. First, the light from the stove hood looked like candlelight. Loved the cozy vibe. I felt watched, but not by the building. By the idea that someone's day had been planned around mine. The fourth package came closer. Not to the mailroom, but to the hallway table where we leave takeout menus and forgotten scarves. The note. It's nice that you keep your doormat so clean. That blue really complements your nail polish. It was the exact doormat blue, which isn't a color that should have a name but does. I looked down at my hands. The polish had been chipped for days. A drugstore color called pool tile that never photographs well. I felt my heart trot. The air in the hallway had that elevator oil smell, metallic and warmed like pennies in a fist. Okay, I said out loud, which is one of the tricks they tell you when your brain is playing you. Say the fear like it's overheard gossip and see if it gets embarrassed. Okay. The police were kind, the way tired people are kind when they've been told to be. The officer took down what I told him and explained in a voice like a brush sweeping crumbs off a table that nothing in the notes was expressly a threat. It's unnerving, I get that. His partner watched my face as if checking for where the cracking might start. Save the notes. Don't reply. Don't escalate. Do you feel unsafe inside your unit? I feel watched, I said. That isn't the same thing, he said gently, and then smiled as if that made it better. Do you have a camera? I did not. I bought one that night. It was sleek and childishly easy to set up, a little eye I could stick above my door and ask to testify. I angled it just so, made sure the hallway would be visible, drew a line through my living room in my head where life would end up on file if I walked past at the wrong time without pants. I turned off the overhead lights so my lamp could do that warm, evening thing it does, and I edited until my neck felt like a folded map. When I woke at 3 to pee, there was a square of light from my phone face up on the nightstand, blinking its little attention-seeking notification. Emotion alert. I sat in the blue dark with my knees hugged to my chest and watched the recording. The hallway slept in grayscale. My door sat there, closed like a mouth thinking hard. At 2:17 a.m., a shape slipped into the frame from the far end of the hall, the kind of shape that belongs to a person who knows how to move without being introduced. They were careful to stay just out of the camera's generous angle, like they'd come to see a painting and knew exactly where the blind spot was. I could make out the hem of a hoodie I recognized, my logo printed small above the pocket. It was a limited run, a soft kind of fabric with a certain slouch. I'd shipped 300 of them in little gray mailers. The hoodie brushed the handrail. I heard nothing, of course, but the movement suggested a hum. They held something square and set it down with a lover's care at the threshold, fingers resting a heartbeat longer than necessary on the edge of the package. The motion notification cut off before the person's face could wander into it. It was as if the camera's lens blinked. I didn't go back to sleep. At dawn, the hallway had a cooled down smell, as if the building had been sweating all night. The package was a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim in the exact place I always chipped mugs, on the right because I am careless when I wash dishes. The note. This one's safe to love. I checked the rim for you. There are different kinds of fear. There's the movie theater kind, the jump scare that delights you so you can go back into the mall and buy a pretzel and laugh at your nerves. And then there's the fear that dries your mouth and makes you notice your breath getting lazy. I took the note to the kitchen and set it down next to the witch book like they might discuss me when I turned away. I emailed the merch distributor. Could they pull a list of buyers with that hoodie? They could not give me addresses, they said, but they could flag anyone who had contacted support. They sent me a spreadsheet with 4 names and redacted email handles. One of the tickets asked if the hoodie would shrink in the dryer. The support agent wrote back, "We recommend hang dry." The customer replied, "K, she'll like that, it looks softer." The ticket was closed. The name was common enough to be nobody. The next video I posted was scheduled for 3:12 a.m. on purpose. I watched the analytics graph at 3:13 like the stock market. The first comment landed at 3 hours 13 minutes and 17 seconds. First, I like when you're up late. Streetlight looked like a gold coin on your cheek. At 3:16, the camera recorded the hallway. The figure slid into the near-invisible wedge of blindness and left a package. Another note, Pebble cried when I set it down. He's protective. Pebble is my neighbor's dog, a speckled old thing with a weak sneeze and a heroic bark, who throws himself bodily at my ankle in the elevator and then immediately apologizes. I had never said his name on camera. I had said once, "There's a dog next door who loves the sound of soup cans," but I had never typed PBBLE with my thumbs for the internet to find. The hallway smelled like someone else's shampoo and cold pizza. The elevator chimed behind me as if it had an opinion. I knocked on my neighbor's door and Pebble did his routine. The woman who owns him, Jess, hair up, sleep shirt advertising a band that ended before both of us were born, yawned in my direction. I held up the note. "Was anyone in the hall around 3? "God, probably," she said. "Pebble barks at silence. He'd bark at a thought in an empty room." "This is going to sound weird," I said, and told her anyway. She read the note twice. "That's creepy," she said, and looked like she wanted to touch my arm but decided not to. "Do you want me to walk you to the mailroom or something?" "I'm okay," I said. "The police said nothing is a threat yet." She rolled her eyes in a way that involved her entire face. "Yeah, they love that word yet." When I called the police again, the officer on the phone recognized my address and said, "Did you get another present?" As if he were making conversation at the dentist. He told me to keep documenting. He told me not to engage. He told me the camera was a good idea. He did not tell me what to do when the idea of sleep felt like a mouth that wouldn't open. I started leaving the TV on with the volume low, not to drown out noise but to encourage it. Give the apartment another voice so mine wouldn't get bored and start telling stories. I filmed a video about organizing my entryway shelves and pretended my hands weren't shaking. I put the cute bowl for keys off to the right so it could catch the morning light. I said we too often, like the audience and I were roommates. When I played the footage back, my hallway looked narrower, as if the camera was compressing the building's ribs. On the next tape, the figure didn't linger in the blind spot. He tested the lens. He stepped to the line where the cameras I could have had him if he'd leaned. The hoodie's logo winked once when his shoulder turned. He lifted his hands and mimed straightening a frame that wasn't there. It was small and practiced. He was used to watching me straighten the little frames in my videos, the way I tug a thread from a folded throw so it doesn't catch on my ring. He was wearing my rhythm like a stolen shirt. The package was placed so flush against the door I had to tug it free. It was my brand of tea, not just the kind, a specific blend I'd only ever shown once, barely in the background, leaves dusty on a spoon. The note: "You always watch the kettle 2 seconds longer than you need to. That's cute." That night, I carried my laptop into bed and watched everything I've ever posted as if it were evidence in a case against me. I watched my own hands, my own breath, the way I talked to objects like they were shy children. I watched the reflection in the microwave and the shadows in the bookcase and the window across the alley where sometimes a different blue glows late. I watched how often I look at my door without meaning to. It is not a threat yet. That phrase kept coming back like a burned taste. I wrote a note and taped it to the inside of my door at eye level, so the paper's shadow made a thin gray mustache on the wood. "Please stop," I wrote. "This is over the line." I stared at the word please until it stopped meaning anything. I took it down and rewrote it harder. I did not post for 3 days. The first comment still arrived within a minute on an old video, a necromancy that woke up my phone at 2:03 a.m. "Miss you. The hallway feels quiet. The building has its own noises. It talks to you if you live inside it long enough." The radiator pinged like a distant fork on glass. The stairwell made a throat noise. The elevator sighed as if it had been given a secret and was holding it thoughtfully. At 2:21, the camera caught nothing but the changing texture of darkness in the hallway. At 2:47, the motion alert went off anyway. I clicked and watched my own door in a frame where nothing moved for a full 10 seconds. Then, as if remembering a line, a white square slid under the threshold. The person on the other side had measured the door. The card fit so precisely it didn't catch on the jamb. I picked it up. The paper felt expensive and quiet between my fingers. "You don't have to be afraid," it said, in handwriting that looked taught to a left-handed child. "I keep us safe. I make sure we match. I know exactly where your camera can see and where it can't. I called the police again because you are allowed to ask for help more than once." The woman on the phone this time sounded like she'd slept better than I had. She said the words paper trail in a tone that was meant to comfort and did not. She said, "We'll send a car." I met the officer in the hallway under the camera. He looked up into its round, polite face and waved. We both laughed like we were playing along with a toddler. "Do you have access logs? Key fobs?" he asked the next morning at the office. And the manager, a man who always wears a sweater light enough to see his shirt through, said, "We're working on upgrading the system." He showed us a printout of numbers that might have been history or might have been weather. "We don't have the kind of..." He began, and then made a gesture like a net with holes in it. I wanted to ask him where he bought his sweaters. I wanted to tell him about the blue on my doormat that apparently matched my nails. Instead, I said thank you like it was a habit. I posted again because my rent does not care about my nerves. I made a slow, careful video about fixing the unraveling tassel on my throw. I left the camera running longer than necessary and then I left the room. I let the empty apartment breathe on film, an absence that hummed. 3:04, the first comment arrived. "First, I love the way the tassel is fixed. You'll grip it when you open." I didn't see that comment until 3:08, because at 3:06 there was a soft touch against my door, like a knuckle politely asking the wood a favor. I froze by the window. I could see my reflection in the glass, a person-shaped smear inside a city-shaped smear. I counted to 20 the way you do when you're trying to be fair. I opened the door, heart steadying itself against my ribs with both hands, and looked down. It was a box, the kind with a real ribbon. The note was tucked under the bow like a sleeping ticket. "You'll need this," it said. The box was heavy and cold. I carried it to the table with my breath held and cut the ribbon with scissors that clicked like a small warning. Inside was a camera, but not a new one. My camera, the first one I ever used, the model with the dead pixel I used to crop around. I had sold it 2 years ago to a viewer in a different state who wrote a kind email about starting their own channel. The serial number scratched into the casing was mine. Shouldn't have been here like a boomerang. Under the camera was a thumb drive shaped like a key. I didn't plug it in right away because my hands didn't feel like they belonged to someone allowed to do that. When I did, a single video file bloomed open. It was dark. The soundtrack hummed with air and a faint, almost cheerful whistling. The image flickered and then settled into a familiar view. My doorway, my hallway, my little slice of carpet. But it wasn't from my camera. It was from the other side of the peephole. The lens was pushed up against it, fisheye, the world rounded and intimate. I watched my door from an angle my door had never seen. A hand appeared, gloved, and pressed a note flat against the wood. The glove was printed with tiny stars. My throat did something small and inconvenient. I took the thumb drive out and put it under an inverted mug, like I could trap it. When I sent the police the footage, the report came back with words that had taken the afternoon off to lean against a wall and smoke. They would increase patrols. They would notify the office. They would recommend I change my locks, install a second camera, consider a chain. They would not, it seemed, change the shape of the fear. Jess in the hallway put her hand on Pebble's collar and said, "Come stay on my couch if you need to. I'm serious." I thanked her and stood in my doorway and felt by feel alone the exact points where the ribbon had cut into the box that morning. I scheduled one more post, and this time I left a gift of my own. I wrote a note and slid it under the door from my side so that it would look like it originated outside. "I'm moving." I wanted to see what that would make hands do in the night. I left the camera pointed wider. I boiled water and watched it because apparently I always do. I did not sleep. At 3:13, the comment, "First, don't be dramatic. The blue will look good anywhere." At 3:19, the hallway. The familiar hoodie, the careful, obedient steps. The figure hovered at the edge of the frame, head tilted like a listener. They bent, picked up my note, read it, and then stood very still for a long time. I could not see their face, only the place a face would be, like an address without a door. Finally, they reached into their pocket. They pulled out something small and bright and set it under the mat with 2 fingers. When they were gone, the hallway took a breath. I waited until morning because the night made every movement feel like a confession. The key was warm from staying in its own metal. It wasn't to my lock. It was a mailbox key. On the head of the key, scratched with something sharp and patient, were the letters US. The merch spreadsheet came back to me then, the customer who said she'll like that it looks softer. I went to the mailroom. The stainless steel boxes glittered like they had teeth. I slid the key into my box. It didn't fit, of course, but it fit the small auxiliary locker where packages go when they don't fit inside individual boxes. The door swung open. Inside was nothing but a note on creamy cardstock and a strip of blue rubber welcome mat backing. "I listen for your kettle," the note said. "I wait until it stops." I moved a week later because moving is a kind of spell. The new building smells like varnish and somebody's dinners. The hallway light switches have a delay that makes the dark feel like a curtain being considerate. I changed my posting times. I changed the color of my doormat to a brown that refuses to be named. The first night I slept on the mattress on the floor with boxes stacked around me like slow, square animals. At 1:07, my phone buzzed. A single comment on a video I had scheduled before I packed. "First, the brown is shy. It will learn to be brave." I turned my head very slowly toward the door. Somewhere in the building, a kettle screamed and then swallowed its voice. I lay there, watching the shadow of the peephole make a round on the wall like a quiet eye, and knew that what keeps you safe is not the lock, not the key, not the camera, not the police patrol shifting past the window. It's the time between the boil and the pour, the longest 2 seconds in the world, when you hold your breath and listen for the sound of someone who loves your silence as if it belongs to them. I never thought much about what was in my background. You set a camera on a stack of cookbooks, frame your face, dab a little concealer over the 2 permanent zits along your jawline, and hope the ring light makes you look human. My apartment is one of those shotgun places that have been sharpened into lofts by a developer who says industrial like it's a food group. There's a concrete pillar, a leaning plant that hates me, and a window that takes in a slice of the block. If I tilt the camera just so, you can see the corner bodega across the street, the green awning, the red letters promising Lotto or ATM coffee. It's not the prettiest set, but I like the tiny hustle in the background. Makes me feel like I'm not talking to myself. My channel is small, cozy. People tell me they watch my videos while folding laundry or cooking dinner or trying to sleep. I do little life stuff, thrifting, recipe tests, the occasional book chat. I keep names out of it. I don't geotag. I'm not stupid. The internet is a grid made of teeth. On a Tuesday that smelled like wet cardboard, I went to the big grocery on Maple, the kind with a polished concrete floor and playlists determined by an algorithm that thinks you're still in college. I had a list on my phone and a tote bag that used to say, "Save the planet," before the ink cracked. I did the usual loop, produce first, then dairy, then the absurd aisle with maple bourbon aioli and $12 honey. You get to know the choreography. The squeak of a cartwheel is like another shopper's accent. You know the clerks who smile like they're not allowed to frown. He bumped me at the apples. Just a brush of the metal carts, a tinny clink. He laughed immediately, fast and apologetic. "My fault," he said. "I never passed the Granny Smiths without losing control." He was maybe mid-30s, clean denim jacket, those boots city people buy when they feel embarrassed by their calves. He had a bouquet of parsley sticking out of his basket like a small flag. "No harm done," I said and steered away because that is the rule. Keep it light, keep it moving. He didn't follow. I forgot him by lemons. But he was at the coffee shop later. I heard the laugh before I placed the face. That same quick chuckle. like something had delighted him and he wanted to share it without being too much. He stood behind me in line like a good citizen, leaving a healthy buffer, looking at the pastry case with the reverence of a museum goer. When I ordered, he glanced at my shoes and then at my ring, a habit men have when they are looking for permission they already plan to take. I felt the tug of being seen and made my shoulders smaller. "Hey," he said when I stepped away, coffee in hand. "We had a cart collision earlier. I'm still rattled." The tone was joking, designed for a chuckle. "Hope you recover," I said. I smiled because it costs less than confrontation. He nodded like we were co-conspirators and then, mercifully, turned to order. I told myself it was nothing. Cities produce echoes of people. You see the same faces because there are fewer paths than we pretend. Suspense beat. 2 blocks later, I heard footsteps match mine for half a block, then drift off. When I turned, it was only a woman in a pink coat dragging a tiny dog that had already given up on the day. That night, during my stream, the chat crawled like a slow river. Someone called Lila asked about my skillet. Someone named Houseplant Grief confessed to killing a fern in 1 week. I talked about garlic, how you should smash it with salt to coax out the good stuff, and made a joke about vampires and landlords. I wasn't looking for the corner bodega until I saw the messages stick. A user I didn't recognize, handle a string of numbers with a name smashed into it, typed, "Green awning looks familiar." Another, "We must be neighbors." I replied with a heart and a shrug emoji. "Every city has a green awning," I said to the stream. "It's the law." At the laundromat, the smell of warm detergent is almost like safety. The hum makes your bones settle. You can sit with a paperback and feel like a person who exists on the correct axis. I was pulling damp t-shirts into a wire basket when Denim Jacket Man walked in with a bag that looked light enough to be a decoy. He saw me and performed surprise like a magic trick. "Hands up, gentle grin." "This is wild," he said. 3 times. "Third time's the charm," I said, and regretted the phrase immediately. It handed him a space he could step into. He sat not too close. He folded a single sweatshirt for a long time, corners aligned with a precision that made me think of protractors and people who alphabetize their spice racks. "I live a few blocks over," he said. "Maple and 3rd. The bar across the street has trivia nights no one goes to." He told me he liked the grocery because the carts didn't squeal as much. He told me he worked remote, and that the quiet was making him too good at hearing things like his neighbor's cough and the way pigeons fight in the morning. "I'm Nina," he lied. The name felt like a coin you drop before anyone can read it. "Nina," he said as if tasting it. "I'm Luke." He made another joke about our carts. He asked what I was reading and I made up an answer. When my dryer finished, I pulled my warm clothes to my chest and tucked the paperback between them like a secret. Luke stood as if we'd been on a date. "See you around," he said, and the phrase wasn't threatening until he made it too smooth. Suspense beat. That night I got an email, subject line, "Big fan." The body was earnest and long and ordinary in all the ways that make you put your guard down. He liked how I talked about small things. He said he also had trouble with cilantro. He said he felt like he knew me. The signature was just L. The walkability of the neighborhood was suddenly a web strung between me and him. The corner cafe had a bell over the door that sounded like a spoon in a glass. I changed my routine. I took the long way down streets that smelled like old rain. I tilted my camera away from the window so the bodega became only a sliver. I changed the time of my stream without telling anyone. You think you can out-routine a stranger the way you would a man in a dream. A week, then 10 days, and then I saw him again on the block with the bakery that sells bread that goes stale in hours because it refuses to be anything but itself. Luke leaned against the parking meter like he had grown there. He had a bouquet in his hand this time, not parsley. Real flowers, wrapped in that paper that looks like a map to a place no one can find. He smiled with relief, like I was a lost piece of a puzzle he had worried under the couch for. "Hey Nina," he said, "you've been scarce." "I've been busy," I said. Cars whispered past. A bus sighed like an old lady sitting down. I moved as if through syrup. "I have to go." "You owe me a hello," he said, friendly but firm, as if reminding a roommate to take out the trash. He held the bouquet out, then pulled it back when I didn't take it. The face around his eyes didn't move. "I keep seeing you. That means something. It means we live in the same neighborhood," I said. I wanted to say I didn't owe him anything. I wanted to say he didn't know me. I wanted to say, "Please don't follow me." What came out was thin, "I'm running late." His eyes flicked to the bakery window, where a chalkboard listed the day's bread in handwriting that tried too hard. "I like your videos," he said, and my stomach did the slow roll of a boat. He said my real name next, the one I never say on camera, and the air went cold on the inside of my skin. It landed like a hand on the back of my neck. "You're careful," he said, admiring. "But there's the bodega. The mural with the blue heron reflected in a puddle last week. The way you said the bus made you late twice, only one line here is that bad. And you always film after sundown, which means your window faces west. It's like solving a crossword." I heard my own voice saying thanks, brain on autopilot. He didn't touch me. He didn't raise his voice. He just smiled a smile that wanted to be recognized. "We should get coffee," he said. "I even know your drink." I walked. He let me go like a fisherman lets a line pay out because he knows the fish is tired. I went 3 blocks, turned again. When I looked back, he hadn't followed, but the feeling of him came along like static that won't shake free. 2 nights later, there was a note shoved under my door, wedged so it wouldn't slide farther in than I could see without opening. My name in the loopy handwriting of someone who keeps their penmanship on a leash. Said, "Sorry if I came on strong. I'm not a bad guy. I think we're meant to meet properly." My palms went damp, then cold. I peered through the peephole and saw only the scuffed hallway and the carpet stain like a country on a map. I slept badly. The heat clanked to life and I flinched. Every hallway footstep belonged to him. Every car horn was a message. In the morning, the bodega had a crate of oranges stacked like planets, and I wanted to tell the man at the register about Luke, to say if a denim jacket crops up, call the police. I wanted to cry. I bought milk and willed myself to look whole. I started carrying my keys like a weapon between my fingers. I started filming at my desk with the blinds closed. I didn't go to the cafe. I ordered groceries online once, and then felt watched by the act of avoidance, like a superstition that catches fire because you feed it. When I saw him again, it was the kind of day that presses fingerprints on your face. The grocery store was cold in the way public buildings are, filtered and unscented, a place with no seasons. I went late, when the aisles empty out to a hush and the lights feel like a hospital's. I loaded my cart with practical things: eggs, detergent, frozen peas. The peas felt like ballast. The little lies you tell yourself. Frozen vegetables, responsible woman, safe life. He waited in the frozen food aisle with a bouquet and an itinerary. That's not dramatic language. He had paper, a printed list with times and addresses, a sidewalk map highlighted in yellow. He stood by the glass doors that fogged where the seals failed. The bouquets in his hand looked tired, petals already soft at the edges. He wasn't hiding, wasn't lurking. He was parked like a person waiting for a late friend. When he saw me, relief washed over him in a visible softening, like a coat sliding off a hook. "Finally," he said. He said my real name again, easy like a song chorus. "I thought you'd pick Tuesday or Wednesday. It's okay. We can still make the late set at Club Satellite." He lifted the paper just enough for me to see my own street name listed, the hours I'd streamed for the last month, the cafe, the path to the laundromat, the bus line. There were hearts next to some times. There was a circled note. "Bodega counter guy knows her." I took 1 step back. The door behind my shoulder breathed cold on me as if the freezer could inhale. Somewhere, the store's radio tried to cheer us with a song I used to like. Luke frowned, but not in anger, in patience. "Don't make this weird," he said quietly. "You owe me a hello." A clerk rolled by with a pallet jack that beeped like a toy backing up. He glanced at us and then away, because in public we are taught to trust the performance of normal. 2 people near ice cream, a man with flowers, a woman with a cart. It read as harmless from a distance. Up close, I could see Luke's jaw working, the way his fingers tightened and loosened around the stems, leaving shy green bruises. "I don't know you," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. Please move. He didn't. He pivoted with me when I angled to push past a gentle block, like we were partners and he was leading. You do, he said. I've been listening. I hear how your voice changes when you talk about that childhood house with the lilac bush. I know you're trying to drink less caffeine. I know you miss your brother, even though you don't say his name. He smiled gently. I'm doing the work, see? I'm paying attention. That's love. Love isn't surveillance, I said, and the words felt like something I'd read once and tucked away for a day I hoped wouldn't happen. My cart was a dumb shield. He leaned in the barest inch, and the smell of him was laundry soap and the ghost of cigarettes. His pupils were large. He wasn't a monster. He was a man with a story he liked better than the truth. He slid the itinerary into my cart. We can start with coffee, he said. Just say hello. Don't leave me hanging. The last sentence cracked a little. Suspense beat. The glass behind him whispered with frost. A light flickered above us. A lazy stutter the maintenance guy probably meant to fix last month. The aisle felt like a tunnel. A woman at the far end opened a freezer door and stood staring into the fog like a lost traveler consulting weather. I looked at his face and saw something I hadn't let myself see before. How practiced this was. The coincidences, the jokes, the way he performed apology like a musician hits a note he knows the crowd wants. If I complied, it would be chapter 1. If I made a scene, I would be the hysterical one. The exit at the end of the aisle might as well have been 100 miles. I'm going to leave, I said, clear and a little louder. Don't follow me. I moved the cart forward. He stepped aside then, surprising me, the bouquet dipping like a bow. His mouth twitched. You'll come around, he said softly, and then more steady, like he was reminding himself as much as me. You owe me a hello. I left the cart. I walked past him with my hands visible, like there were rules we both understood. The world didn't tilt. No one screamed. The song on the radio changed to a slower one. At the end of the aisle, I glanced back because that's what people do, and he was still there, very still, watching the frost cohere on the glass like something growing overnight. Outside, night had come. The parking lot lights hummed. I got in a cab I didn't need and let it take me 3 blocks out of the way. Then another, telling the driver nonsense turns until my pulse calmed and my body began to feel like a thing I might get to live in again. I didn't go home. I sat at the back of a diner that smells like melted butter and old coffee and waited for the sky to turn an unconvincing gray. I called a friend and I made my voice funny and brave so she wouldn't cancel her plans to come babysit my panic. I called the non-emergency police line and described a man with a bouquet in a freezer aisle and listened to the typing on the other end. I let the woman assure me I had done the right thing. I thought about the itinerary folded in the abandoned cart. My life reduced to lines and times and little hearts. I moved my camera. I put a towel under the door so notes could not be slid beneath it without work. I told the bodega guy to never tell anyone my name. He promised solemnly as if he had ever told a soul a secret that wasn't his. For a while, I didn't stream. The chat filled with gentle question marks and then emptied again when kindness ran out of things to say. Weeks pass and the neighborhood grows its mask back. But sometimes, when I pass the freezer aisle, I see the ghost of a man who believed that repetition was proof. I feel the breath of cold air push against my sleeve and smell something like parsley, faint and wrong in the context of ice cream. I look at the glass and think about how frost patterns look like maps if you squint, the kind of maps you can follow right off the edge. I never did say hello. Not then. Not later, when my DMs sprouted polite messages from burner accounts. Just checking, thought I saw you at the bookstore. A part of me is ashamed at how often I think about it, how the word sits on my tongue like a held cough. I imagine him walking the loops of our neighborhood, grocery, cafe, laundromat, grocery, making his own route out of mine. I imagine the grocery store worker finding a damp itinerary under a stack of coupons and tossing it without reading. I imagine that bouquet in a trash can, petals bruising into a darker red. Sometimes, late, I hear a laugh from the street that I can't place. Comes in on the air with the smell of hot garbage and bus brakes and the bodega's fryer. It sounds almost delighted, almost sorry. I get up and adjust the blinds. I make the plant face the wall. On stream, I put a sunset video in my window so people say, "What a view." And I feel like a magician, which is to say a liar who got good at the trick because the other option was worse. And when I walk the grocery on Maple, I keep my hands on the cart, and when I pass the frozen food aisle, I pretend to be listening for a song I can't quite name. Something that might be a love song, might be a warning, might be the sound of frost drawing a line no one should cross. The night it really starts, I am streaming from the folding desk that wobbles when I type too hard. The room smells faintly like hot dust. Computer fan, ring light, the plastic of a tripod that's been warmed by LEDs, and the only other scent is the candle that claims to be linen breeze, but is really just soap trying to reinvent itself. Outside, the complex is quiet in that city way where you can hear the elevator cables in the concrete, the occasional slam of a car door, and a laugh that's probably a fight waiting to start. My chat is small but friendly. We talk about cheap coffee brands, and the cat my neighbor claims is shared custody, even though it likes me better. It's ordinary, and that's the bait for anyone like me. Ordinary feels like safety. He is in chat that night under a handle I've seen but never noticed, posting timestamps and favorite moments. 2:14 when you snort laugh, he writes, and I roll my eyes and make the face. Another message, 4:51, when your headset slips. Goo. Harmless, I think. The internet is a scrapbook of moments nobody asked to be dried and pressed. Before I end the stream, I say, "See you Wednesday, same time, same place," and I mean it. If you move the goalposts on your own life, you stop scoring at all. On Wednesday, I begin to recognize his pattern. He clips. I can see the little notifications from the platform, creator tools, "Your clip is popular." And the clip titles are dull but energetic. Funniest, best laugh, coziest stream vibe. I tell myself he's just enthusiastic. People collect baseball cards. People archive strangers. It's all the same obsession, just with a different uniform. A week later, I find his channel. I go looking for a song I hummed and told chat I couldn't place, and end up there because the title uses the lyric I misremembered. The thumbnails are my face in freeze frames nobody is meant to freeze. One eye half closed, mouth open, a pixelated lightning strike of hair out of place. He captions everything with the precision of a court transcript. Notice how she smiles to herself here when she reads the name. Pay attention to the way she relaxes after I say goodnight. My name is not in his handle, but it might as well be tattooed on the code. I tell myself he's lonely. So am I. Loneliness is a parlor trick. It makes jugglers out of people who don't have any objects in their hands at all. The first call comes from HR. I work in a building with carpet squares the color of oatmeal and glass walls that make everyone perform, even the printers, which shudder like anxious dogs. "We got an email," my HR rep says, and I can hear her pulling up her prepared empathy voice the way a nurse might pull a curtain. Several emails, actually. Videos. She tells me a man has compiled clips of me to suggest a relationship. They want to verify if there's any conflict of interest, any fraternization. I let the word frat roll around in my head like a cold marble. I say no, of course not. I don't even know this person. She reads the subject line aloud. "She's mine." He sent it to my department's group inbox at 2:04 a.m. with 20 links and a paragraph that sounds like a wedding toast written by a paranoiac. "We understand that online harassment is complex," HR says. "Can you keep us updated if anything escalates?" I hang up and the office smells like toner and fear, which is the same after a while. That night I look again at his channel. The editing has changed. He's stitching the fragments into a narrative. The cuts are clean, the soundtrack low enough to be insidious. A hum of air conditioner that becomes a heartbeat if you let it. He's moved on from cute moments to pointed arguments. "She looks left when she's about to lie," the caption says, and then he freezes my glance. "She changes her schedule after I tell her goodnight." Classic test. He highlights a replay where my shoulders slump and loops the motion until it looks like I'm nodding yes. His comment section is small but devout. People who know my name now or think they do. They say things like, "You two are goals," and "It's so obvious if you look." One says, "She'd deny it at work." They all do. I close the tab and the dark reflection of my face in the monitor looks like a second person trying to press forward, fogging the glass. My mother calls the next day using the tone you save for dead pets. "I got a video link," she says. "Is this a prank?" She reports my aunt's share. A Facebook post with a collage of me laughing and drinking from my chipped mug, overlaid with captions in red like blood that isn't but suggests, "She's mine," in block letters. "We met here." The "here" links to a live where I said I loved my chat. He has cut the chat off the sentence. "Your cousin asked me if I knew you had a boyfriend," Mom says, as if she left me near an open window and I crawled out. "Do you?" I try to explain parasocial relationships and deepfakes and how editing is a kind of witchcraft you can do on a phone in the carpool lane. She listens the way she used to when I said the boy down the street threw rocks at me. She wants to fix it using money or casseroles. "I'll report it," she says. "I'll call somebody." She says somebody like it's a cop or a god. At the bank, a woman named Leah calls and says there were fraud alerts. A new card was attempted at a hardware store 2 towns over. A streaming subscription purchased in my name. A delivery scheduled to an address I don't recognize. We close it all, and she says she's sorry like it's her fault we invented numbers. "He doesn't need to meet you," Leah says, and the words make my neck cold under the hair. "Some people build the room around you and then they invite everyone else inside." I block him. I block the handle and the backup handle, the one with a 0 instead of an O, and I report the channel, the playlist, the Google Drive folder he forgot to hide where he's named each clip by date and a little note like a groomer's card. Outfit blue sweater. Eyes tired. Mood teasing? He pivots instantly to broadcast. He sends the same reel to my coworkers, to my family, to my landlord, to a dance studio where I took a trial class 3 years ago and abandoned after 10 minutes because my ankles are cheap glass. The subject line is always the same. She's mine. In my apartment, the neighbors fight in clangs and low thunder. I mute the TV and hear their plates, the war of dishes. I think about how everything in a building is shared. Even things like arguments and cooking smells and the echo of someone's cough down a hallway that turns corners like smoke. Maybe privacy isn't the myth. Maybe it's the thing under the myth, like the fish under the ripple you point at and say is the fish. I call the police and they say a version of HR's thing and my mother's thing and their own thing that is a department shrug. Not a threat yet. "He says you're together," the officer tells me. He's not threatening violence. The officer says this as if you only die one way. That week at work, the glass walls become mirrors. People who used to say hello now wave from inside their bubbles like astronauts. My boss says we have to consider reputational risk for the company and asks if I can go private for a while. I think of my folding desk and ring light and the way the chat makes my one bedroom feel like a bar in a small town where the bartender knows your soft drink and your real story. I tell him I'll think about it and hear the familiar click of a door being gentle but firm. He uploads a documentary, 90 minutes long, with chapter cards and a breathy narrator whose voice sounds like a power line humming just outside the frame. The chapters have titles that pre-defend themselves. The meet cute, clipped from the stream where I said hello. The fight, me taking a bathroom break while he replays a chat message about someone trolling me. The makeup, I return and smile. He maps my schedule using timestamps, a data scientist of my heart. She goes offline exactly when I tell her I'm going to sleep. He notes, and the graph looks like consent. The comments begin to tag my employer. A coworker I barely talk to asks if I can keep my personal life out of the team chat because everything weird is discoverable. My landlord texts to say someone sent him a video of me saying, "I'm home," and to please remember the guest policy. "No boyfriends after midnight," he writes, joking, and then, "Seriously though, in between I keep stream hours like a person keeps church, not devout but afraid to stop in case God notices. The people who like me, really like me, send kind notes. We're here, we know it's fake, don't let him win." I read them, and then I read the other ones, the questions disguised as support. Why would he put in the effort if it wasn't true? You might owe him at least a conversation. And then the flat voices that move in packs. Admit it. He called it first. What are you hiding? They don't ask if I'm okay. They ask if the footage is chronological. One night, my mother calls to say Aunt Diane posted the documentary with a caption about modern love, and I sit on the floor of my office and feel the carpet leave little bites in my knees. I let the ring light buzz without turning it on because it makes a noise like a distant beehive, and something about that feels alive. He doesn't call me. He never emails me directly. He never tries my door. He buys a set of knife sharpener stones in my name, a weekend getaway, a bouquet delivered to my building lobby with a card that says, "See you at 9, which the doorman reads out loud and looks at me the way a person looks at a storm siren. Not angry at the noise, but hungering for shelter. He knows he never has to touch me to touch my life. He's discovered the inverse of stalking. If everyone around me believes we already met, then every no sounds petty. Inside the next stream, I talk about oatmeal while boiling water and watch the clipper count jump like frog legs. I whisper to my chat by accident, "He'll cut this?" and then catch myself, and then decide I don't care. I lean in until my breath fogs the lens and I say, "I'm not yours," which, when isolated, will sound like admission. I lose and do not lose at the same time. HR calls again. "We need to move you to remote for a while," they say. Optics. My boss adds me to a meeting where the agenda slides by with the smooth confidence of the guillotine. Brand risk, I hear. Narrative management. In the corner of their screens, children and dogs and spouses move like friendly ghosts. Somewhere a coffee grinder roars. I mute myself and stare at the tiny rectangle that is me and think of zoos. You don't have to hunt in a zoo. You just pace and wait. At the bank, Leah says, "He's moved to small amounts. A test of your edges." $1.06 on a song. $3.16 on a cloud storage plan. "He wants your flinch," she says. Her voice has lost the performative compassion and gained a hard, bright kind of care like glass after rain. I start a new channel. I think of naming it something like No Narrative, but that's a narrative too. I put a plant behind me that is real and will die if I don't water it. A deal I appreciate. I turn off the live chat so the room is only me and the hum of the building and the faint tick of my cheap wall clock. People watch anyway. They send messages later. "Are you okay? Your silence felt loud." He clips my silence and calls it communication. I go to my mother's house for a weekend to prove to myself there is a place where nobody thinks they know me. Small town quiet is different than city quiet. It has stars. The living room smells like wood polish and old carpet and the ghost of a dog we buried in the backyard. We eat strawberry ice cream out of the carton with 2 spoons and watch a movie about a family who loves each other loudly. When the doorbell rings, Mom stands like she did when I was 5 and the neighbor came to say I'd fallen off my bike. But it's just a delivery driver with a bouquet in a vase with a card that says, "First date jitters are cute. Don't be late." There is no return address. The flowers smell like a wedding I didn't plan. Mom wants to post about it. "I'll tell everybody he's lying," she says. "I'll show them the truth." I tell her there is no town square anymore, only 1,000 screens angled like mirrors until the truth is mostly lighting. She doesn't understand what I mean, and I envy her confusion like people must envy those who sleep through storms and don't have to learn the names of clouds. The last stream I ever do is just me in the office holding the bouquet. I talk about the shared custody cat, how she sleeps with one paw pressed to her face like a tiny detective considering the evidence. I talk about oatmeal again because it is an honest food and I want to speak the language of plain things. I talk about the documentary without naming it, how there is a difference between attention and possession that you can only see if you look at it sideways. I say, if you love something, don't claim it. Watch it breathe. My chat is soft with hearts and the braver ones tell me the clippers are here. They're recording. I say, I know, and I blow out the linen candle. The room fills with the smell of that long exhale. He uploads the stream intact. No captions. No score. He titles it Last Date, and the comments debate whether the lack of cuts proves or disproves the story they already committed to. Someone writes, "She finally admitted it by not saying it." Someone else, "Silence is consent." I turn my phone face down and the screen lights my palm like a campfire you can hold. The building hums, the elevator cables sing their metallic lullaby. A neighbor drops a pan that sounds like a gong in a temple. Life goes on and gets smaller. I switch banks and jobs and states. On the first night in the new apartment, I opened the window and listened to a train half a mile away lay down its steel voice across the dark. The air smells like wet leaves and the paint they used to cover the previous tenants' mistakes. I don't stream. I buy a radio that only plays whatever is in the sky at the moment, and I let the static braid itself around the stations. There is a comfort in not choosing. And still, months later, I will overhear a conversation in a grocery store line where a woman says, "You know that girl online? She was in something complicated." And I will know she's talking about me, in a different city, in the aisle with the seltzer and the crackers, with a cashier scanning oranges like they are answers. I will feel that airless thing again. Reputation as a room with no doors. I will smile at the cashier and say, "Paper, please," and take the bags home. I will water the plant. It will live. Sometimes, late, I see the white rectangle of my phone light up across the room, painting the wall with a passport-sized version of my own face from a video I did not shoot. A friend will text, "Is this you?" I never know how to answer that question anymore. I watch for a minute, the pixels stuttering like a heart monitor, and then I turn it face down again and the room returns to dark. It's quiet except for the fan and the clock and the sense that somewhere in someone else's living room on someone else's family TV, a story is still playing that everybody thinks they've already seen. No actors in it, just screenshots glued end to end, convincing enough to ruin a life. I close my eyes and listen to my own breath. I don't record it. I don't save it. I let it go. I cut hair for a living, which is a kind way of saying I spend a lot of time listening to people tell me what they hate about themselves. The touring part happened because my cousin runs a salon in Lubbock and my friend Sal owns a chair in Amarillo, and between them were a dozen towns with bad bangs and wedding updos waiting to happen. Gas prices being what they are, I started an online page a couple years back, clips of on-the-road life, before and afters, motel blow-dryer hacks. It helped pay for tires and the kind of coffee that keeps your teeth humming at midnight. Folks followed. Some tipped. One man, no avatar, just a highway sign for his profile photo, commented under everything. "Drive safe. Proud of you. Love how you take care of people." That last one had a heart next to it, the plain kind, not the cartoon. Tuesday, I left Abilene with a cooler full of string cheese and cut fruit and a suitcase full of hairspray cans. The sky was the bleached blue it gets before heat really settles. I drove with the window cracked and counted flattened armadillos because you need some kind of dumb game to keep your mind from turning into a lint trap. I posted a quick update at a gas station outside Merkel. Phone leaned against the wiper fluid, so I could talk hands-free. "Long drive tonight," I said. "Haircuts at the VFW tomorrow. If you're in town, say hi." He said hi in the comments before I finished the bottle of water. I'm close. There are a lot of innocuous explanations for a comment like that. People live places. The world is small. But I remembered a message from him a week back when I'd shared a clip of rain hitting a motel window. "You're near the grain silos," he'd written. He was right. The silos had just ghosted past the corner of the frame. A thin stack of concrete ribs in a gray wash. I hadn't said where I was. At dusk, the motel sign flickered on like it didn't want to admit it had a job. The bell, 2 stories, elbows of outside steps, doors painted the color of toothpaste. I like places where your car can see your room. Less chance you have to walk a long corridor that smells like boiled hot dogs and old air conditioner. The clerk was a man with forearms like old wood, sun and sawdust baked in. He looked up from something on his phone and smiled the way clerks smile when they've already judged you harmless. "Reservation for Lane," I said, and slid my card. He kept the smile but didn't touch the card. "Your boyfriend already checked in," he said. I laughed. "That'd be a neat trick." "Tall guy," the clerk said. "Ball cap." Said he'd grab the key and wait in the truck so he didn't scare you. "I don't have a boyfriend." He looked at the card then, like maybe the name had changed. "Well," he said finally. "He had your last name and he knew you wanted ground floor near the ice, so I figured. I hadn't told anyone about the ice. It was a habit when I booked ground floor near ice because ice meant people and people meant if you screamed it wouldn't be swallowed by drywall." "Can I see what he signed?" I asked. The clerk slid the clipboard over. The signature sprawled like a child trying to impress a teacher. The last name was right, the first name wasn't. Still, someone had written it with the confidence of a person who believed small lies were just practice for big ones. I told him I didn't know the man. He rubbed his jaw with 2 fingers and grunted and said he'd put me in a different room, and if anyone asked at the desk he'd tell them to get lost. The new key fob had an old brass number stamped on it, 108. There's always a smell when you open a motel room. Chemicals and someone else's television. This one added the faint sweetness of cheap cologne, the kind that promises seductive nights and delivers headaches. My stomach did a slow roll, but I told myself it was residue, housekeeping's boyfriend, a guy who misted himself in the mirror before she drove him home. I dropped my bag, cracked the window to get the night in, and found the note on the pillow. White copier paper, the kind that peels off a stack with a dry gasp. In block letters, "We made it." The I was a line without a dot. There's a different kind of tired that settles into you when you've been seen without your consent. It's like your bones remember their openings. The clerk swore when he saw it, then held his hands up like I might be the kind of guest who sues people who swear. "I'll comp the room," he said. "Want me to call the sheriff?" "And say what?" I asked. "A man knows how to write? Say someone's screwing with a woman alone," he said, which made me like him better. He dialed. The sheriff deputy took 40 minutes to arrive and had shoulders like a bridge. He listened, nodded, wrote nothing. He walked the row of doors with the clerk and stared across the lot where a semi idled with its lights off, as if it were a living thing conserving its blink. "He's probably just some boy," the deputy said when he came back. "Internet makes boys bold." "I'm 34, I said. My grandmother was already on kid number 2 at 34. Boys don't leave notes that practice future tenses. He shifted, considered the words, and told me to lock the door and deadbolt and set my phone to do not disturb except for 911. "You want me to knock the truck?" he asked, and tilted his chin at the dark rectangle of the semi. "Only if you want to be a story he tells," I said, and when he smiled, I thought of a rabbit pausing because it thinks that's how you play dead. After he left, the clerk brought me a can of root beer and a small bag of pretzels. "For the nerves," he said. He waited like he wanted permission to say something. "I don't know much," he added, "but you seemed like you had the kind of day I can ruin with advice." "There's a man who thinks he knows me," I said. "Advice is already a crowd." The page pinged because I hadn't turned off anything. I saw his comment because it was always him first. "Room looks cozy." The clip I'd posted hours ago had included a 2-second sweep of a lace curtain. That could be anywhere, but there was a curve in the curtain where someone had cut out a tiny notch to let the rod slip by a rusty bracket. That was here. That was this room. Sometimes you think your life is private until you start describing it. Then you realize you've been leaving breadcrumbs and the woods are full of birds. I shoved the dresser against the door. It didn't do much besides make a sound, which was maybe the point. I did the tour of the room you do when you're scared. Shower curtain, empty. Under the bed, only carpet where someone had not vacuumed near the edges. Closet, a single plastic hanger shaped like a question mark. I took the hanger and hooked it through the door chain because a little hack like that makes you feel like you've earned your worry. The note on the pillow lay there with its black letters. I put it in the trash and then took it back out because evidence is only evidence if you keep it. Around midnight, the air conditioner made a noise like it was choking on a nail. Around 1, a couple next door told each other the kinds of truths you only say at 1 in the morning. Around 2, I slept. It was the mean kind of sleep that crashes into you and doesn't trust you with dreams. At 3, the car alarm went off. I stood before I was awake. Sound does that. It reaches into the pit where your animal lives and yanks. My key fob was on the table and I pressed it and the alarm stopped, but the quiet after was worse, because now every sound had to reintroduce itself. The truck across the lot still idled. Its lights were off and its grill was teeth. A glow burned in the cab where the dash lit with a pale square. Phone light or GPS or a man's face washed in blue. It's funny what the mind does to fill a distance. It adds the sound of breathing and a hand on a steering wheel and eyes that don't blink. Through the thin wall, I heard my page ding on his phone. The little two-tone chirp I'd said a year ago because I liked how cheerful it was. "I followed you like you asked," he said. The voice came through the wall as if we were in an apartment building and not a motel. as if we were next to each other on a couch and not divided by paint and studs. He said it again, louder, as if I hadn't heard the first time. You said, "Come say hi if you're in town. That means you, doesn't it? Doesn't it?" I didn't answer. The clerk's number was on the check-in sleeve. I called. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been sitting with the phone in his lap. "I hear it," he said. "Stay put." A knock came from the shared wall, not the door. It was ridiculous and terrible, the way a child knocks on furniture and calls it a house. "You've been calling me a lot," the voice said through the plaster. "Every time you say long drive, I hear my name in there. The long drive, that's what I am." There was a pause, and in it you could have slid a photograph of any woman in any room. "Your comment said, 'I'm close tonight,'" I said, because fear needs to grab something. "What does that mean to you?" "It means you're not alone," he said. "I figured out your days. It's not hard. Mondays west, Wednesdays east. Fridays you sleep at your sister's if the road's been bad. I worked it like math. You told me your car's color once when you did the miles per gallon story. You think people don't collect the little pieces? They do. I did." Footsteps came along the balcony and the clerk knocked on my door in that 3-rap pattern men used to show they belong. "It's me," he said. "Deputies on the way." In the wall he laughed. Not cruel, just delighted. "We're all meeting," he said. "Finally." The clerk's key scraped and the door opened against the dresser an inch. He leaned in, pushing with his shoulder until it squealed. He had a baseball bat. I loved him briefly for having an old, simple plan. He jerked his chin toward the other door, 110, and we walked out into the night like the air might be a trap. He banged with the end of the bat. "Law's coming," he said. "Open up." The voice inside went soft. "There's no law for love," he said, and then he laughed again, smaller. The door opened 2 inches. I saw a wedge of a face, the shape of a cheek, the blur of a cap bill. He lifted his phone up as if it were authority and the lens stared like an insect eye. "Smile," he said. "First night together." The clerk swung. The bat hit the edge of the door and the door hit the chain and bounced. The phone jerked back. There's a moment when something breaks where everyone becomes the person they really are. The man dropped his sweet voice. He said a word I won't repeat. The truck across the lot switched off, as if it had been listening and decided its part in the show was done. Footsteps on metal stairs. Fast. A door down the row opened and a woman peered out with a towel around her neck and then closed it again because everyone thinks they want to see until they do. The deputy rolled in with a spurt of gravel and floodlights and an attitude that had improved since the evening. He got names and made statements and did that cop thing where they tidy the story to make it fit inside a form. The man in the cap was gone. The note was evidence now in a plastic bag like a sandwich. The clerk apologized in 100 variations. I said, "It's not your fault," in 100 variations back. Dawn stuttered into the sky like someone reluctant to wake. In the gray, the truck was a smear of oil that never had features. I did the VFW cuts because I said I would. A woman sat down and told me her husband had decided to grow a beard as if that were an event that merited a certificate. I lifted her hair and snipped and thought about the children I used to babysit and the way they'd press their hands on the glass when their parents pulled away. People need witnesses even to their small departures. That's the good side of it. The other side is a man that thinks a public post is a private vow. I bought a second phone that afternoon and gave it no name. I told no one where I'd be next, not even the page, and the page got quiet because quiet pays nothing. I used cash for the bell, and then I didn't use the bell because a clerk has a bat but no shield. The deputy called 2 days later and said the plate on the truck came back to a woman in Kansas and the VIN didn't match and maybe it had been a stolen tag. Maybe the whole thing had been a ghost of a story that would fade once I stopped feeding it. That night, in a different motel with a door that stuck in humidity, I scrolled my own old posts like they were someone else's baby book. Every caption was a breadcrumb. Here's me saying headed west, and in the frame the sun lay down on a shoulder of road that only did that in 2 counties. Here's a gas station where the pump had a duct tape bandage in a precise shape and anyone who watched the video twice could pause and triangulate. Here's me laughing about a pie at a diner, and you could read the name on the pie case if you paused on the right syllable. I deleted 100 things, and for each one it felt like I was blacking out my own memory, like I was an archivist destroying the originals. Before I slept, I opened the new phone and recorded a message without my face, just the bedspread. "I'm taking a break," I said, "from the page and the road and the idea that my life needs to be documented to be real." I didn't post it. I watched it once and deleted it too, because even a bedspread has a pattern, and the pattern belongs to a room, and the room belongs to a place. Around 3, because 3 lives in motels, a vibration traveled through the wall. A phone charging, a truck shifting into some lower hum, or a man pressing that two-tone chirp with his thumb to test if I'd forgotten the sound. I lay there and counted breaths and let my fear have a mouth. In the morning, there was a fresh note under my door. No envelope, the same block letters, the same gap where a dot should be. "We'll be quiet," it said this time. "We'll drive together without saying a word." I checked the hall. Empty. The world went on making coffee and unlocked cars and long lists of small errands that keep you from thinking you're prey. I packed. I paid. I pulled onto the highway and merged into a river of vehicles that all looked like mine from a distance. Half an hour in, a semi slipped behind me and stayed, a big cool shadow that made the mirrors lie. I changed lanes. It did too. There are 100 reasons for that, I told myself. None of them are me. The road narrowed to 1 lane for construction. The semi breathed behind me, calm. The driver's name might have been a woman in Kansas. It might have been nobody. It might have been a man in a ball cap grinning with his new idea of quiet. At the next exit, I pulled off like I'd meant to all along, waved like a person without fear, and turned into a diner lot bright as an operating room. I went inside, sat at the counter, asked for eggs I didn't want and coffee I did, and watched through the big plate glass window as the semi rolled past and then didn't, as it turned, slow as thought, and settled in along the edge of the lot, lights off, grill tilted toward the door like a head cocked to listen. You can tell yourself 100 stories about coincidence, about schedules, about how the world is full of people who think the same second is theirs. You can even say the word paranoid out loud and let it sit between your teeth like a seed. When I stood to pay, I felt eyes on the back of my neck, the polite weight of attention, the way strangers hold you without hands. On the door on the way out, someone had taped a flyer for a lost dog, a yellow lab with a silver face and hopeful eyes. The number at the bottom had tear-off tabs, and every tab was gone. That should have made me feel better. The idea that people would pull a strip because they cared didn't. It made me think how easy it is to carry around a piece of somebody else's life in your pocket, to fold it and unfold it until it becomes the shape of what you want. I stepped into the light and the heat and the smell of old fries, and the truck idled with its lights off, and the road, long as a promise, waited to collect us both. I used to think security meant stronger passwords and one of those little plastic keys that makes a laptop blink like a cop car. In my town, it also means you learn which gas station pumps actually click off, which neighbor keeps a spare ladder behind his garage, and which waitress at the diner will add an extra scoop of hash browns if you look too wrung out to argue. That's the kind of place I live in. 2 blinking stoplights, a hardware store that smells like cut pine, church bells that sound 2 minutes late every Sunday. I make most of my money on a page people think is glamorous and isn't. It's a job like any other. Lighting that pretends to be sunlight, coffee that pretends to be sleep, the same sweater finding 10 different personalities depending on the caption. My problem was never the work. It was the inbox. You'd think the worst things would be the obvious ones, but it's the gray middle that wears you down. Questions that aren't quite questions. Compliments that are really invoices. People who use your first name the way a parent uses your full name when you're late for dinner. And one night, after losing an afternoon to sorting, deleting, tagging, answering, I put out a call. Part-time mod needed. Volunteer. Perks include gratitude and early previews. Must be decent. He wrote me first. Let me be your guard dog, the DM said, with a little emoji of a shepherd, pink tongue lolling. The handle was a forest of underscores and a first name that could have been a middle. Cal? His bio said, customer support in real life. Here to help protect spaces. Paw prints. The paw print looked silly. I wanted silly. I gave him a test. 20 messages, 3 of them hidden landmines. He walked me through them, polite and almost shy. I liked that he double-checked his assumptions, that he asked before he blocked. Your space, your rules, he typed. My job is to enforce them so you can breathe. The first week he was sunshine. He color-coded everything. He made a spreadsheet without me asking, a little heat map of peak message times. He drafted replies that sounded like me without stealing my voice. He saved me hours. At night, he'd send me a digest. Flagged a weird one from X. Refunded Y because shipping label error. You told Z you'd check in. I gave them a timeline. There'd be a paw print at the end like a wag. I slept better that week than I had all summer. By week 2, he was looser. We should talk boundaries, he wrote, and I agreed. He suggested a no midnight messages rule. He added a canned reply for people who asked for special content, a phrase that always smelled like an alley behind a bar. He caught a guy trying to butter me with gift cards, and I caught myself smiling at the screen like Cal could see it. He started signing off. Go get some sleep. I'll keep watch. The first jolt came quietly. A paying member wrote to say they couldn't see their perks anymore. I didn't block them, I told Cal. They asked about a photo, he replied, and it felt unsafe. He explained the tone, the subtext I hadn't noticed, how these things escalate. He was persuasive and kind about it, and because the thought of opening that inbox made me taste metal, I let it slide. I thought of the hardware store bell and the way Mr. Greeley would lean over the counter when I came in, whispering weather reports like secrets, and I thought maybe some men like to help. Maybe some of them are built like porch lights. He DM'd more. In between updates, he would slip in a note. You look tired in that last video. Remember water. He asked if my friend Marta was good for me because she sounded flaky on the live I did from the diner, and I laughed and said, Marta's flaky like pastry. She still shows up. He suggested I do less of the sweater with jeans look because it invites certain kinds of comments. Guard dog with emojis, I told myself, and if a guard dog growls at the mailman, well, some dogs don't understand mail. Mini cliffhanger. The night my phone lit up at 2:11 a.m., vibrating itself toward the edge of the nightstand. 16 emails. Refund issued. Refund issued. Chargeback opened. Each one a little knife. Cal's digest came 3 minutes later. Saw suspicious purchases. Preemptively refunded to avoid bigger issues. Cleaned out some unsafe accounts. Go back to sleep. I sat upright in the blue light and texted him. What purchases? That's not our policy. 3 dots pulsed for a long time and then stopped. I called my bank because panic makes money feel like oxygen, and the woman on the line spoke slowly like she was used to crying people. Ma'am, she said, there were disputes you hadn't answered. If you don't have access to your own dashboard, someone else does. I didn't say it, but I knew who. I'll fix it in the morning. I wrote to Cal, and he sent a paw print and a moon. Felt like a hand on my hair, like being patted. Morning didn't feel like morning. The dashboard wouldn't let me in. The 2-factor just spun. I went to the Authenticator app, and the little 6-digit code flickered, and then the account name changed. Slid like a label being peeled and restuck. My recovery email was wrong. A stranger's string with my name glued to it. I tried to swear, but it came out small. I called the platform. Due to high volumes, a voice told me, please try again later. The day crawled. Orders froze in limbo. A girl from Ohio wrote me asking where her beanie was, and I wrote back manually from my personal email and felt like a kid passing notes in class under a teacher's eye. I revoked Cal's access. It was right there in the menu. Remove moderation privileges. I expected a little burst of confetti. Nothing happened. He messaged 5 minutes later. Hey, did I do something? It's me. I thought we were a team. I typed and deleted twice. It's not that, I sent finally. I need to see the bones of this myself. 3 dots, again, and then a pause that felt like someone breathing outside my door. You were drowning, he wrote. I jumped in. If you make me let go, you'll go under. Mini cliffhanger. The text from an unknown number that afternoon. 2-factor code. 674226. I hadn't asked for one. My stomach went cold. Another text followed. If this wasn't you, change your password. I would have if I still owned my front door. I packed my laptop and went down to the diner where the Wi-Fi doesn't ask questions. The bell over the door jangled. The coffee tasted like burnt toast and penny coins. Marta slid into the booth, all elbows and worry. "Tell me why your face is a storm," she said, and I did. In the low slice of a voice that belongs in confessionals and hospital corridors. She reached across the formica. "Go to the carrier store and change your SIM," she said. "New number, new everything. And block your little helper." At the carrier store, a kid with hollow eyes tapped at a terminal for almost an hour. "Weird," he muttered twice. "Like you're on, but there's a ghost on the line. There's a forwarding rule in your email, too. You didn't do that." His monitor flickered a little, and I could see my name reflected in it like I was already a story someone was telling later. He put my number on a brand new card and slid it across like a talisman. "Try to think like a burglar," he said. "Assume they hid a key." I found the key. It was a little metal Y-shaped thing in a small padded envelope on my apartment's brown carpet, the kind of envelope that remembers every fingerprint. No return address. Inside was the key and a sticky note in neat, unfussy handwriting. "For when you're ready to be safe," it read. See, I sat down right there in the hallway like a kid and breathed in the smell of everyone's dinners. Onions, red sauce, a whisper of bleach. Mr. Alvarez from 2A unlocked his door and stepped out, nodded, and didn't ask. In some towns, people want the story right away. In ours, they let you carry it home and unwrap it slowly. I gave the key to Marta to hold. I made a stubborn, ugly decision. I would reset everything without him. Took days of phone calls that made me feel like I was shrinking. "We can't confirm you," they said, and I started building little paper piles to remember who I was. Tax forms, utility bills, photos with date stamps. Meanwhile, refunds kept vanishing, mostly small ones that add up. Chargebacks spiked. People who had been sweet grew sour as milk left in the sun. "You said you'd protect us," one wrote. "Your mod said you're going through stuff and to be patient, but it's been 2 weeks." Your mod, like he'd taken a uniform I didn't hand him. He DM'd less and posted more. He'd leave comments under my posts like he owned the hallway. "Not answering DMs tonight, her sleep schedule matters," he'd say, and strangers would heart it. A chorus of praise for a man I hadn't hired. He wrote me privately, too. "Hate to say it, but Marta stirs the pot. She doesn't respect your craft." He suggested a reset day, which in his dictionary meant, "Don't go out, don't post, don't answer anyone but me." He sent another paw print, and I imagined opening the door to a dog on the mat with a leash in his mouth, waiting. Mini cliffhanger. The night a message pinged from my bank app, "New device approved." I hadn't approved anything. I hit "not me," and my phone rang like it did in old movies, a sound that makes the room feel taller. The bank woman's voice was tight now. "We're seeing attempts to route deposits to a different account. Do you recognize the name Calderon Support LLC?" I told her no. She put a freeze on the account, and I sat in the spongy quiet of my apartment and counted my breaths like coins. The refrigerator hummed and ticked like a metronome. Across the floor, a line of water crept from the bathroom. The tank had been sweating all August, and now it gave up. The stain on the ceiling below would be mine to pay for. "This," I said out loud to the buzzing, "is stupidly literal." I went to the police station the next morning, even knowing the tune. The officer at the desk had a nose that had been broken once and set a little too low. I told him about the refunds, the access, the sticky note with the neat letters. He listened and then lifted his palms. "It's not that we don't care," he said. "It's that we don't know where the crime is yet." He gave me a pamphlet about online safety. It had a cartoon lock on the front and language written like I was my own aunt. "Document everything," he said, "and don't poke the bear." I didn't poke. I baited. I made a new email with a name only my mother would recognize. I made a new page, ugly on purpose. No banner art, no personality, just a form. Contact for support. I seeded it with one post about delayed shipments and waited. The inbox coughed once and then filled with the gray middle. Questions that were secretly accusations, accusations that pretended to be questions. In 3 hours, a message arrived with a paw print at the end. "This is sloppy," it read. "You could have asked." I didn't answer. He wrote again. If you want me, say it. The third message was the one that turned my blood to glass. If you want the codes, meet me where you feel safest. Where I feel safest is the diner, sticky menus and all. I told Marta to sit at the counter, to watch for a man with a laptop and an emoji sticker, because that's what I'd built in my head. I took the booth by the window and watched my own reflection double in the glass with the streets. A man came in with a toolbox and a fluorescent t-shirt that said, Julian Electric. A mother with a stroller. A kid with a skateboard he didn't want to set down. The bell over the door kept screaming, and every time it did my spine did, too.
Nokal.
I went home and there it was. A florist's box leaning against my door like a lazy body. Inside, red carnations and one dogwood branch pried from somewhere it belonged. Another note, safety is obedience. You were happy when I took it from you. Let me do the part you can't. I tore the note into strips so thin it looked like lint. He wasn't moderating, I told the empty room. He was auditioning for ownership. I started doing old-fashioned things. I paid for groceries in cash for a while. I wrote addresses on envelopes with a pen so cheap it scratched. I took my laptop to Mr. Greeley's son-in-law, who runs a repair shop out of a garage that smells like solder and new plastic, and he wiped it down like he was washing a dog after it rolled in something dead. You'll need to live like a person in the woods for a bit, he said, and somehow that sentence felt like an apology and a blessing. The platform finally recognized me as me after I mailed them a stack of papers so thick it could have propped a door. I watched the dashboard numbers crawl back toward normal, like kids coming home after a storm. I made new passwords and hid the backup codes in a place that still remembers how to keep secrets. A library book with a bad cover that no one would check out before the year turned. I went a whole day without a paw print. Mini cliffhanger, and the last one I'll give you. Last night my phone buzzed at 3:19 a.m., the hour when the street outside is a stage set and no one has the part yet. A notification hovered in the blue dark. Your 6-digit code is 674226. The same numbers from the beginning, as if time liked to eat itself. Below it, a prompt, approve sign-in? The options were 2 soft buttons, yes and no, floating like teeth. I didn't touch either. It faded on its own, like breath on glass. My door was a rectangle cut out of the night. The hallway smelled like other people's lives. Somewhere down the building a faucet was dripping, slow and stubborn. I unplugged the router. The room made a noise like a sigh, sudden quiet, the kind that makes you hear your own heart working. In the stillness, another buzz, my old, dead email forwarding what it wanted. We noticed a sign-in from a new device. If this was you, welcome back. Sometimes I think about the note. For when you're ready to be safe. I still don't know if safety means living like I'm guilty of something, or if it means trusting the bell at the hardware store and the late church and the waitress with the extra hash browns. I sleep with the laptop closed and the little plastic key tucked into a shot glass on my nightstand like a totem. A joke. I tell myself a story where I never invited a guard dog inside, where I never fed it, where I never let it see that I was tired and grateful and in love with the idea of not having to hold the whole thing up myself. It's quieter now, but not empty. At odd hours, 2 numbers appear at once on my screen. My code and someone else's approval, like a duet you don't remember learning. Maybe he's out there in a different town, far enough that our nights don't overlap, sitting in a booth with a coffee going cold, waiting for a bell to ring. Maybe he's close enough to hear the church music 2 minutes late. Maybe he never wanted a cut of anything but breath. I'm not asking you to be careful. You're not a child with matches. I'm asking you to notice who offers to hold your house keys and what they do with their hands while you're sleeping. And if your phone buzzes at 3:19 a.m. with numbers that mean nothing and everything, just know this. Some doors lock from the outside so softly you never hear it. Some men put a paw print on the handle to make you feel like you're home. The first week I moved into 3B. The most noticeable thing wasn't the paint that had yellowed in the corners or the thinness of the walls, or even the way the hallway smelled like last night's onions every morning. It was the windows. They had these nickel latches that looked like little fish hooks, old-fashioned and stubborn, and you had to lean your shoulder against the frame to make them catch. The super told me the building used to be a boarding house, that everything had been brought up to code, which I took the way you take a compliment from someone who doesn't use your name because they've forgotten it. The rent was almost reasonable. I could walk to the train. My parents wanted me in a doorman building with a video intercom, but I wanted a place where the grocery guy learned my favorite seltzer. It felt like choosing the life I could carry myself. I film at home for work. Nothing dramatic, skincare, thrift flips, little night walks with a voiceover. The window shows up sometimes behind me, bluish in the ring light, that little hook latch glinting. My apartment faces the courtyard, a stack of rectangles echoing into other rectangles. By the second week, the algorithm liked my new place. A few thousand more views. Someone commented about the corner bodega they thought they recognized. Looks like 110th and Maple? The pink awning. I laughed because every bodega has a pink awning. I replied with a heart, nothing else. I've learned to keep my neighborhood blurry. On a Wednesday, a message slid into my DMs that didn't match the usual. That window latch dates back to a model used by Billings Manufacturing until 1973. There are only a handful of buildings that kept them. Yours is probably one of the 3 on Ashford. It was accompanied by 3 links to real estate sites with glossy photos. Unit 1C, sun flooded. Unit 4D, original charm. I didn't reply. I blocked the account 2 hours later when they added, "Welcome to the neighborhood. You get weirdos. You learn a tone." I told myself he was a hardware nerd who wanted to impress someone like tossing a fact at a bus stop. Still, I kept my curtains closed at night after that. I taped a strip of painter's tape across the mail slot because I'd found a single postcard stuck at a diagonal, picture of the beach, blank except for a smiley face on the back. The handwriting had that tidy first-grade look. My friend Tasha laughed. "Girl, if you don't stop feeding it," she said, meaning my attention. "If you react, you give it sugar." We were in the laundromat, which made everything feel less serious. She pulled a warm sweater to her face and the static popped. Tape is sugar. The unit below me, 2B, had been empty when I moved in. I could tell because it was quiet at night except for the building sounds, the slow sighs of plumbing, someone's cough 2 floors over. One Friday, I smelled sesame and scallions in the hall around 9, then heard the door below click shut and the muffled drag of a paper bag against denim. Saturday morning, there were shoes on the mat in front of 2B, a pair of white sneakers exactly like mine with the little teal stripe. No big deal. Lots of people have those. Except these had a small scrape on the outer heel in the same place as mine, like someone had caught the curb while looking at their phone. Maybe the mold for teal stripes had a fragile point and everyone was scraping in the same arc. That's what I told myself. I started seeing repetition. The takeout bag hanging from my knob on Tuesdays with the blue stamp. He had one with the blue stamp on his knob on Tuesdays. I'd go to the laundry room at 7 a.m. to beat the rush and the humming machines. After a week of that, I'd come down to find every washer already churning. The only open machine, the ancient one with a rusty lid that clanged. The Super's bulletin board had a new index card the size of my palm. Quiet hours 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., written in marker like a reminder to behave. Someone had underlined 7 a.m. 3 times. The first water stain appeared after a storm. A vague, tea-colored bloom the size of my hand, slightly oval, in the ceiling directly over my bed. I called the Super. He came up with a flashlight and a lacquered wave of hair and told me the building was old. The roof patching had held thus far, and we probably had a fluke from wind-driven rain. He poked the paint with his finger. "Not soft," he said, pleased, as if he were a doctor tapping a knee and getting a perfect kick. "We'll keep an eye." When he left, I lay across the bed and looked up until the stain turned into continence and then into nothing. The smell wasn't mold. It was something metallic, faint, like the smell of coins or blood, which is really the same smell if you think about it too long. On my next night walk video, you can hear the way I keep checking over my shoulder. I didn't notice it until I was editing, the rhythm of my sneakers on sidewalk and the little hitch in my breath about every 30 steps. And it embarrassed me. There's a sentence you start telling yourself that feels like lying. I refuse to be a person who gets spooked by shadows. So I posted the video and made the caption a joke, something about raccoons. The DMs were normal again. For 24 hours, things went back to the right size. Then the guy below me started making coffee at the exact minute I did. The kitchen sink vents run together in our stack, and if someone runs water below you, you hear it in your pipes. It's a polite thunder. I'd set my kettle on, and just when it began hissing, his water would come alive. I clink my spoon. He'd clink his spoon. The first time it happened, I smiled because it felt cozy, like we were two boats tied at the same dock. The fifth time, I felt watched without being seen. I stopped using my spoon. I swirled the cup instead and listened to the quiet, and then his spoon knocked against ceramic anyway. My hands went slick. I told myself it was coincidence. People are patterns, not predators. Tasha said, "Knock on his door and introduce yourself and end the ghost story." But she lives on a street where people bring banana bread to new neighbors and ask how you're doing and mean it. Maybe he's just lonely, my mother said when I told her in a trimmed version that omitted the DMs and the shoes. City buildings make families out of strangers, whether they want to be or not. A week later, the second stain bloomed next to the first. It was smaller, a coin of brown. When I touched the paint, it was cold but not damp. You tell yourself that means something. The next morning in the hall, there was a grocery bag outside 2B with my favorite seltzer poking out. The store brand, grapefruit. He could have seen that anywhere. My videos, the recycling room, my Instagram story from a month ago. But seeing it there, identical, made me wince like I'd bitten ice. I took the long way to the train, past the pink awning bodega everyone recognizes. I stopped filming in the apartment as much. I did my face routine off camera. I posted a time-lapse of clouds from the roof, which made the comments say, "Wow, you're brave," because everyone knows what a roof camera means. The super had to buzz me out onto the tar paper. He eyed me up and down like he was measuring the range from girl to woman. "Roofs are for maintenance," he said. I bought a cheap camera for the bedroom, the kind you stick on a shelf and forget about until a package goes missing or a raccoon breaks in. I didn't know how to aim it without pointing it at myself. It felt like a violation twice, once from the watcher and once from the watching. I set it toward the window at an angle so it caught the ceiling and a slice of the bed. I told myself it was about the stains, documenting a landlord problem in case I needed leverage. At 2 in the morning, I woke to a drip. Not the romantic kind, a fat, impatient drop that hit with weight. I turned on my lamp. One of the stains had darkened from tea-colored to near black, a bruise spreading. I put a bowl under it. The drip was not regular. Came, then waited like it was listening. The bowl filled slowly, tinny, and the room began to smell like pennies. I took a video on my phone in case the super wanted proof and texted Tasha a picture. She sent back a string of exclamation points and then, because she knows me, "Do not catastrophize. It is plumbing, not omen." The camera in my room caught something too, but I didn't know it yet. Morning makes you brave. I called the super again. He came up with the same flashlight and said, "Eh," which is the noise of a shrug in a mouth. "We'll look from below," he said. He meant to be. He went down. I locked my door. I pressed my ear to the floor like a kid in a cartoon listening for a train. The hall below murmured. Keys, a door opening, voices too low to make into words. There was laughter, not the super, a lighter laugh pleased with itself. I felt my heartbeat double and then slide. Yeah, the super had to shout up the stairwell because I wouldn't open my door. "It's nothing. Ceiling's fine down here. No sign of a leak." He was indignant. The building had defied me, which is a sin. "What about the dripping?" He made a show of not hearing me. "We'll paint it when it dries. Put down towels." He went away. I sat on the kitchen tile and waited until the kettle boiled. I finally looked at the footage from my camera that afternoon, more to scold myself for paranoia than anything else. The room was an aquarium in gray light. The bowl under the stain was a pale moon. For long minutes, nothing happened, just the slight banding that cheap cameras give, that sense a machine is doing the best it can to make sense. Then the stain darkened. The drip began. I fast-forwarded. I almost missed it. A pulse. Not from the stain. From the vent over the bedroom door, the one that draws stale air from the rooms and carries it up and away. The vent slats were fixed at a downward angle. In the gap between them, something reflected. A dull glass blink. It was only a sliver, a coin edge, but the way it flared and went dark, made my skin go hot and then cold in stripes. The lens wasn't pointed at the ceiling. It was pointed at my bed. The blinking was a power light or a recording indicator, covered and revealed by a fingertip. I started to stand and had to sit again because it felt like the floor would not hold. In the hall, footsteps sounded like the building was thinking about them. I picked up my phone with my swollen, stupid fingers and called the police, and they put me on hold. While I waited, I texted Tasha only the word vent, and then I heard a soft click on the other side of my door, like someone had leaned their palm against the wood. The click was followed by nothing. Sometimes nothing is worse than whatever you were afraid of. The police came with a speed that made me feel both silly and grateful. 2 men and a woman who were polite in the manner of people reluctant to make a report without a crime. We stood in my bedroom and looked at the vent. "Could be a reflection," one of the men said. "Is someone in 2B?" I asked. The woman looked at the stain like it could answer. "He signed a lease last month," she said, as if that were a kind of vetting. "His name is Michael. We can ask if he's seen anything." I almost said, "He has my shoes." I said, "Please." They knocked. The door opened partway and then all the way. I saw a living room arranged like mine in reverse. Same cheap bookshelf. Same rug from the big box store, except mine had coffee on the fringe and his didn't. There was a smell of coffee and sesame and something sweet, maybe dryer sheets. The man who opened the door was the kind of handsome that photographs badly and looks better in person. Ordinary handsome. He wore a gray t-shirt and an expression of concern like he'd practiced it for the mirror. His hair was clean. I recognized his face. I didn't know why. The police asked if they could see his vents. "Of course," he said, stepping aside. He looked at me with polite curiosity and the softness people save for stray cats. "We've been on the same schedule," he said, like it was a coincidence we could laugh about later. "I hear your kettle." I could have said, "I hear your spoon." I could have said, "I know how you like your seltzer." Instead, I stood on his rug while the officers looked at his bedroom vent and kitchen vent and the square cutout in the hall that gives access to the plumbing stack. "Old buildings," he said, a shrug in his mouth. "I grew up in an old place." He had no water stains on his ceiling. He had a framed photo on his dresser of a pier reaching into a foggy lake. It was both generic and too specific, like all things that make you uneasy. The officers thanked him. He said, "Anytime." In the hallway, the woman gave me a card with a hotline on it. "Call if you notice anything else," she said. "If you're worried, stay with a friend." I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on and watched my own door. At 3, the drip began again, a suspended heartbeat. Then, like a dream you enter, the scraping sound of a screw tasting metal. I didn't move. The vent over my door was a rectangle of shadow so gentle it could have been a painting. The screw whispered, then stopped, then whispered again. I thought of the postcard smiley face, the window latch, the links, the way a person could walk through the internet into your house with their shoes off, polite enough not to track dirt. At 4, the building hummed like it had decided to be morning early. I packed a bag and went to Tasha's. She didn't ask me to explain beyond what I could say without choking. The lens, the stain, the mirror habits. She put me in her guest room with a pile of blankets like a nest. "We go back in daylight," she said. "We bring a friend. We bring tamper paint. We bring a screwdriver." We did. At 10 a.m., I was braver than I expected. The super was nowhere. In my bedroom, the bowl was half full and ringed with a copper line like a measuring cup. We took down the vent cover and found nothing. No lens, no tape, no dangling wire. Behind the vent was a shaft that smelled like dust and strangers, knocking down into the dark. Tasha wiped her hands on her jeans and said, "I hate him." We put the vent back on. We brushed tamper paint across the screw heads. We moved the bed. I filmed nothing. I told my audience we were doing a reset, which is what people call it when their life feels like a deck of cards mid-shuffle. The stain spread anyway. It grew like a thought you can't keep from returning to, a slow bruise that wasn't wet but carried the memory of wetness. I bought noise-canceling earbuds and then stopped wearing them because I wanted to hear everything. One night I heard laughter again, 2 floors below, and a word like, goodbye. Another night I heard a knocking at 2B, then dragging. My friend Elena from down the hall stopped me on the stairs to say, "New guy in 2B? He's sweet. He brought my groceries up when the elevator was out." She smiled fondly. I smiled back and pretended not to hold my breath. A week later, a plain white envelope appeared under my door. Inside was a single Polaroid of my window, taken from the courtyard at dusk. The curtain was drawn. The fishhook latch was visible like a signature. On the back, where a note would go, someone had written, "I hope the ceiling doesn't keep you up." There was no handwriting like a child's this time. It was cleaner, adult, a font of a man who meets eyes. I took the envelope and the photo to the police, and they took copies and said the words they always say in different orders: documentation, ongoing, escalation, and then they handed me another card, a different hotline, as if the numbers were a ladder and I could climb away. "Consider moving," the woman said gently. In the end, it wasn't the photo or the stains that made me do it. It was a clip that surfaced in my recommended videos late one night, tagged by an account I didn't recognize. It was me in one of my early apartment tours, before I learned that every detail is a breadcrumb. I'm holding a thrifted lamp and I laugh because the shade is ugly, and I say, "Okay, I can work with this." In the corner of the frame, just behind my shoulder, the window latch gleams. The comments below the clip aren't the usual. They're like notes left under windshields. "I see you. Ashford looks different in winter. Unit 2B has the better light." I reported the video. It reappeared on another account with a different song under it. I found another apartment. Different borough, different kind of quiet. The day I left, I sat on the floor of 3B and waited for the movers to come back from the truck. The room was a square that remembered me. The stain over the bed had dried to a dull map, a country with no name. I stood on the mattress with a screwdriver and took down the vent cover one last time, just to see. No lens, no tape. But in the dust, along the inner edge, there were faint scratches like someone had tried to line something up in the dark and missed. I cleaned them with a damp rag because the impulse to tidy is a form of grief. In my new place, the windows open with a smooth click. The latches are different, a flat plate and a thumb turn. I told myself that had to mean something. I don't film as much at home. My viewers noticed the change and some of them drifted away, which is the price of light. My mother sent me a ceramic dove for the bedroom windowsill, and I let it live there even though it's not my taste. Tasha came over with plants and a miniature screwdriver set, a joke that made us hold each other by the cheeks and cry. The other night, I woke to a sound like a camera shutter, a tiny plastic crook of a noise that could have been anything. The heat knocking, the building settling, a neighbor closing a drawer. I lay still and listened. There was no drip. There was only the slow, ordinary quiet of a building that does not know my name. I almost fell asleep with the comfort of that. And then from the vent above my door, different shape, different angle. A glassy glint pulsed once and went dark, the way a reflection does when a car passes on a wet street. Maybe that's all it was. A stray streetlight, a trick of geometry and sleeplessness. Or maybe the person who rented 2B liked upward mobility. Maybe he learned the layout of ceilings and stacks as well as he learned my schedule and the scrape on my heel. When the light went dark a second later, I felt for the camera app on my phone with fingers that didn't feel like mine and listened to the silence that followed, patient and smiling, as if it had all the time in the world.